traditional, super fun, and all about artisan cheese and more to melt your peaceful heart and toast your peaceful life. Coming to you from the Appalachian Mountains of southwestern Virginia, this is the Peaceful Heart Farmcast.
Hey, this is Scott Hall from Peaceful Heart Farm, and you are listening to the Peaceful Heart Farmcast.
Hello, everybody. Melanie Hall here. I hope you're doing well. The conversation today and every day revolves around the value of tradition, traditional food prep and storage, traditional cooking, and of course, traditional artisan cheese. Topics discussed here are designed to create new perspectives and possibilities for how you might add the taste of tradition to your life. Now, today's show, we're going to talk about our homestead life updates, and then I want to do a nice little discussion on what makes food taste so good. And there's a hint, it's a lot more than taste. And then our recipe for today is going to be cheesy garlic roasted asparagus. All right, first let me talk about the stuff I planted in the garden this week. Oh my gosh, 2 days in a row, 4 hours each day, sunburned arms and hands. And I got about half of my spring garden in the ground. I planted lots of cabbage, some red cabbage, some green cabbage, which is the early Jersey Wakefield, and then 4 different kinds of Chinese cabbage. Now, let's see, what else did I plant? All right, so I did collards, Swiss chard, escarole, mustard greens, and kale. Oh, and let's not forget those peas. Lots of green shelling peas, and also some snow peas. Next week, it will be strawberries and onions, and I think that will finish off the spring planting. Then the summer planting of beans, tomatoes, eggplant, carrots, and celery. That'll kick off in May. Oh, I almost forgot. I planted red Norland and Yukon Gold potatoes. Those are my 2 favorite potatoes for taste and for storage. Now, we've also got lots of visitors coming to the farm this week. Some is family. They're going to come stay for a few days. And then some of our visitors found us on the internet. And we're going to meet with them. They're interested in the Normandy breed of cows. And they'll be taking a look at what we have here to get a better idea of what to expect. Speaking of cows, it looks like we won't have our first calf for another couple of weeks. We will definitely be making changes to the breeding schedule for next year. We should be making cheese by now, but we've got no calves, so we've got no milk. Oh, yeah, the creamery updates are really exciting. Scott went out there and spent, about a half a day, and he dry stacked a whole bunch of blocks. This was a few days ago. And it was so amazing to walk around inside the space that he created. It was like 4 blocks high, and it clearly defined the utility room and the parlor. The barn area has that big 10-foot tall wall on it. That's all it's going to have. But then we're outlining the parlor area where we'll be standing during the milking, and then there's a utility room there. And the wall between that parlor and the whole rest of the building. So all of that was defined, and it was so cool just to be like walking around. It felt like walking around inside the building. And this morning while we were out with the cows, we're going through the morning routine, getting them trained for milking. And I could see the definition of about a quarter of the window in the utility room wall. So I don't know how high that is, and there's still a long way to go, but that's how far up he has the blocks already laid. It's just so exciting. Another thing that is exciting is cooking good tasting food for our families. And I thought today I'd talk about how we as humans determine our preferences for food. So this can help you in thinking about what you cook, how you cook it, why do you do it that way? Why is it important that you're looking for a certain color or taste or texture? And so let me talk about what are the basics of what makes our food taste good. And it's a lot more than taste. We choose our food as much for its pleasing sensory qualities as for health and nutrition. And sometimes that's all we focus on, to the detriment of our waistlines. So we're going to talk about the senses today. And from the earliest days, we used our sensory organs to assist us in basic survival. We have olfactory receptors in our nose. And so we used these to sniff out appealing smells, and also they could warn us of rotten or contaminated food. And then we have taste buds, and those help us distinguish between safe foods and foods that were poisonous. And I'll talk a little bit about that. Bitterness is a quality sometimes of poisonous food. And today, eating food, it's also a pleasurable experience where even the texture is important. Let's get into the sensory experience of food and get a better idea of where we need to grow our understanding around cooking for our families. So the sensory properties of food. Sensory perception, it's the ability of the sensory organs, that was your skin and your nose, your mouth, and all of that. It's your ability to use the sensory organs to detect and evaluate sensory stimuli. And we're talking about odors, tastes, textures, sights, and even sounds. And all of these are active during eating. It's all about the smell, the taste, how it looks. Is it crunchy? How does it feel in my mouth? So each sense organs have special receptors that detect stimuli. And I'm going to be talking about sight, taste, and smell today. So when a receptor that's tuned to your taste bud is stimulated, it produces an electrical signal, and nerve impulses carry the signals to the brain, where the information is processed. And then the brain determines whether the taste is sweet or salty, or whether it is pleasant or unpleasant. Food presents a lot of sensory stimuli. And so I'm thinking that this basic understanding of sensory perception is going to be invaluable to you as a homestead chef or homemaker chef. We don't just throw something on the table, for our families. And we take care in deciding on menus and blends of tastes and textures and colors. And I know you may not think of it that way, but nonetheless, it is what you are doing, kind of even on an unconscious basis. We think of it as just the ingredients that we're putting together, but you are thinking of the color and the smell and so on. I'll start with the sense of sight, then taste and smell. And all of these and more are working in your mind every time you plan a meal for your family. After listening to this podcast, I hope you have a greater appreciation for all you do to make the best meals for your family. Not just nutritious meals, but beautiful, fragrant, tasty, and lovely, luscious meals. So let's take a look, first of all, at the color and appearance of food. A food's appearance is usually the first indicator of how it will taste, and so we're going to start there. Now, the brighter and more colorful the food, the more visual its appeal. Think of those bright leafy greens. Your brain processes information about flavor and texture on the basis of appearance, and then you make decisions about your particular likes and dislikes. This evaluation happens because of our highly developed sense of sight. I'll bet those Facebook pictures of food that everyone is always posting already makes more sense. It's got to look good. Human eyesight is so perceptive that the brain can sometimes even ignore competing messages from other senses. For example, you expect lemon candy to be yellow. If it were colorless, you might have difficulty identifying the flavor as lemon. It needs to be yellow, right? If it were purple, some might even mistakenly identify it as a grape. Yeah, that's a little extreme, but you get the point. You need perception to get the full image of what it is that you're eating. So color and appearance are important to food evaluation. That's why we take care in how we present the food. I think I might do another whole podcast on presentation. So let me just skip on to the basics of the food itself. So factors that affect the perception of a food's color and appearance include its chemical and its physical properties. the chemicals that make it up, and they're going to react differently to light and to heat. And we're going to talk about that. So the quality of the light that's illuminating it and even the other surroundings can adjust what you actually see. And let's take a look at these one at a time. First of all, the chemical properties. So food is made up of chemicals. Chlorophyll, for example, is a chemical that gives green vegetables their color, and varying the amount of chemicals can produce different effects. Like cake made from egg whites will be whiter than white cake made from whole eggs, because the egg whites do not contain yellow carotenoids. And that's how you get that whiter than white cake for your child's birthday cake. Fresh spinach looks greener than old spinach because it contains more chlorophyll. And the older it gets, the more of those yellow leaves you will see, and the paler green it becomes. And then again, it eventually turns yellow. Now, cooking with heat also affects the chemical properties of food. The longer that green vegetables are cooked, the duller and more olive green they become. And they still look tasty, but that bright green is just really, think of broccoli when it's just that goes into that bright green. What happens is the heat chemically alters the chlorophyll in the vegetables. So another example of heat changing the color of a food is baking biscuits or anything that's baked. And the longer you bake it, the darker it becomes. And that changing color is more visible proof that the chemical changes have occurred. So you've seen that when you baked a biscuit or a cake or macaroni and cheese. Now, the physical properties. Let me talk about that some more. Get back to the green. The physical process of food preparation also influences its appearance. Like hollandaise sauce or even mayo, the more that mayonnaise or hollandaise is whisked, the lighter in color it becomes, because the whisking breaks the liquid oil or butter into smaller and smaller droplets, and it whips air into the sauce. So how does that work? You got small oil droplets, and air bubbles scatter light more completely than large droplets do. So the sauce has a whiter appearance. If you've got lots and lots of smaller droplets, then you've got more air bubbles, got more light touching. And that's what makes it whiter. So I mentioned the chemicals in the greens and what happens when you apply heat. Raw spinach and other greens are composed of plant cells that contain large amounts of liquid surrounded by air pockets. So when these greens are cooked, the surrounding air escapes, and then the air pockets fill with liquid. Now the light is reflecting off of the liquid differently than when it was air, all right? And you get this kind of translucent quality. It's almost glowing. And greens that are served a short time after the air leaves the cells, but before they fill up completely with water, those are the brightest and most attractive to our sense of sight. Let me talk a little bit about the quality of light can affect your perception of a dish of food. Different types of lighting can affect your perception of the color. So you've got a plate of greens that you're viewing under candlelight in your dining room. They can appear a bit more yellow than when you looked at them under your bright kitchen lights. And there are ways to make that work for you. For instance, here's a way to work color or lighting. The interaction of a plate as a background with the surrounding food. So what color and what pattern is on the plate, or is it white? And then what garnishes do you have? That can sometimes cause an optical illusion. Now, an example of that is where you have, again, a white cake and it's served on a dark plate, or vanilla ice cream with the chocolate sauce. So you've got the white and the dark. So these are going to appear whiter than if they're served on the cake served on a white plate, or if the ice cream is just served plain on a white plate. because the dark plate or the dark sauce provides a contrast, and it tricks the brain into thinking that the cake or the ice cream is whiter than it is. Contrast is a great way to make something stand out from the crowd. All right, so that's all I'm going to talk about with sight. Let's move on to flavor. So we're going to talk about taste at this point. Why do you like or dislike a particular food? Most likely you're going to say the flavor or the way the food tastes. Again, appearance may provide the first impression of a food and kind of prep you for whether it's going to be good or it's exceptionally good, like really, really white ice cream and dark chocolate. But flavor provides a lasting impression, more so than sight. We're familiar with the taste of food, but what are we tasting and how are we tasting? For that, we use our mouth and nose. Flavor is the blend of taste, aroma, and a feeling factor sensation. These three sensations occur when food stimulates receptors in our mouth and our nose. Let's go back to the chemicals. It's because of the chemical nature of food that the senses are considered chemical sensors, right? Although together they constitute flavor, together all three, the taste, aroma, and feeling, each sense system is distinctly different in that each one is stimulated by different chemicals and detected by different receptors. And that all sounds kind of complex, and I guess it is, but the perception of the sensation happens all at once. So while the food is enjoyed, the appearance, the texture, and the temperature are all evaluated. The three components of flavor are perceived by three separate sensory systems, and I'm really only going to talk about two of them here. Each functions independently, and each continues to function even when one or more of the other systems is no longer works well, or it's not working at all. For example, persons who've lost their sense of smell, they can still perceive the taste and the feeling factors of food. So the term taste is often used interchangeably with flavor, but taste refers to specifically only one component of flavor, the perception of dissolved substances by the taste buds. Now let's talk about the tastes and the taste buds. There are four basic tastes. You have sweet, sour, salty, and bitter. Sugars are the most well-known stimuli that produce sweetness, but certain other chemicals do as well. For example, artificial sweeteners, yuck yuck, like saccharin and aspartame. They taste sweet, although they're not sugars. Or stevia, tastes sweet, but it's not a sugar. The sweet taste of shrimp and other seafood is from a naturally occurring amino acid called glycine. Acids in foods, such as citric acid in lemons and acetic acid in vinegar, those produce a sour taste. Salt, such as sodium chloride or common table salt, produces a salty taste. And then you have a variety of other chemicals that can make up the bitter taste. You get coffee, quinine, many poisonous substances, as I mentioned. Those all create the taste of bitter. So the taste buds are located primarily on the tongue, but there are others scattered about throughout the mouth, and these are clustered of taste cells. And they have the receptors for the basic taste: sweet, sour, salty, and bitter. And so we have the taste buds that taste the acids, the sweetness, the salts, and the bitter components. And what happens is the chemicals in the food alter the chemistry of the taste cells. So if it's an acid, it alters the taste cell in a certain way, or certain taste cells in a certain way. And again, the sweetness, it's going to send a signal. It triggers a signal that then travels through the nerve fibers to the brain, where the information is processed. Yum, yum. Saliva also plays an important role in taste perception. Saliva is mostly composed of water, and it transports it transports the taste chemicals to the taste cells that are on the taste buds. So without saliva, we would not be able to experience the basic tastes. Now let's talk about aroma, the aroma portion of flavor. The perception of aroma or smell is much more complex than the perception of the basic tastes, and it's not as well understood. We can identify only 4, 5 basic tastes, but we may sense as many as hundreds, even thousands of distinct aromas. And each aroma is highly complex. For example, there are more than 800 separate chemicals that make up the aroma of fresh coffee, right? So exactly how do we smell it? Well, it's evaporation. The chemicals in the food evaporate and then they bombard the aroma receptors called olfactory cells. So you have taste cells on the taste buds and olfactory cells on your aroma receptors. And these are at the top of the nasal cavity. Smells are perceived as they evaporate to the nose or up the back of the throat as the food is chewed and swallowed. And from there, again, you've got nerve fibers that transport the signals from the olfactory cells to the brain, where the information is processed. Aroma is often thought of as the most important component of flavor. Without aroma, it would be difficult to distinguish between certain foods. So you're just left with the sight, the taste, and the texture to determine the identity of a food. So aroma is a large component of flavor. And you've probably experienced your nasal passages blocked from a cold, and it would not be uncommon for you to say that you can't taste anything. In fact, you can perceive the basic tastes, but you cannot smell. So you've only got a handful of tastes. It's the smell that makes it fuller into so many more different varieties. You're only getting part of the sensory experience. Here's another interesting factoid. The part of the brain in which information about aroma is received and processed is wired to the part of the brain responsible for memories and emotions. So not surprisingly, aromas often trigger memories or strong emotions. Hence, today we have aromatherapy as a treatment for various physical and emotional ailments. It can actually stimulate the body. Now that you know many more details about the amount of creativity that you're putting into your cooking, how might you look at it differently? All right, let's get to today's recipe. Today's recipe is cheesy garlic roasted asparagus. Now around here, we are just waiting for the asparagus to peek its head up from the ground. Yes, it's that time of year. From April through June, an abundance of fresh asparagus is available. Check out your local farmer's market. Speaking of farmer's market, we will be at the Wytheville Farmer's Market on April 13th from 10 a.m. to 12 noon. No asparagus, but we would love to complement your fresh asparagus with our ground beef, lamb, and or goat. And when we have the cheese next spring, you'll want to complement it with that. So I'd urge you to take advantage of your seasonal asparagus. This particular dish is easy to make and low carb and keto friendly. You can use a cast iron skillet or perhaps a baking dish handed down from your grandmother. It should be large enough for the asparagus trimmed to the woody stem to lay flat. All right, so what do you need? You need a pound of asparagus spears with the woody ends removed. You're going to need 3 tablespoons of olive oil, a tablespoon of minced garlic. That's about 4 cloves minced, 3/4 a teaspoon of salt, a 1/4 teaspoon of black pepper, and 1 1/4 cup of shredded mozzarella cheese. What are you going to do with it? You're going to preheat your oven to 425. You're going to lightly grease that baking apparatus with oil, or you could use a non-stick cooking oil spray if you use that kind of thing. So just really lightly, you're looking to lightly oil it. You don't want that oil interfering with the taste of your dish. You're going to arrange the asparagus on the baking sheet and just set that aside. And then in a small bowl, you mix together the olive oil, the garlic, the salt, and the pepper. Then you drizzle that over the asparagus and toss it to kind of coat it evenly. So basically, you got the asparagus and you've got the oil and your seasonings that you're coating the asparagus with. Then you're going to bake it for 10 to 15 minutes until it's that vibrant green. Remember what makes it vibrant? Because the air comes out, a bit of the water comes in, and it's reflecting a lot more light. So it's just beginning to get tender at that point. Then you're going to remove it from the oven and top it with the mozzarella cheese. Return it to the oven and broil it, or you could grill it also at that point until the cheese melts and it becomes golden. That's going to take about 4 or 5 minutes. You want to adjust the salt and pepper on it if you need to, and serve that up to your family. Easy peasy. Some final thoughts. Life is speeding up here in the springtime. We have lots and lots of stuff going on. I'll bet you do too. There's just something about spring that brings out that gotta get stuff done attitude. Have you been lounging around the house sipping cocoa in front of the fire for far too long? It's time to get out there and experience the fullness of life's pleasures. And perhaps one of your first activities might be a spring dinner party. What about that? It's a perfect opportunity to try something new in the kitchen. You can use traditional methods of food prep to make it a special evening. Bring out, again, Grandma's bacon dish. Put into practice some new ideas about the importance of everything you do in the kitchen. You know, in the 70s, it became really fashionable to think that women were so much better than being a simple housekeeper and a mother. Those were just like far beneath her. And the women that led the charge for this had no real experience in what it takes to be a fantastic homemaker and a mother. They had no idea the complexity of creating a well-run household with fantastically creative meals for the family and close friends, of having the kind of education that I was just talking about why things taste the way they do, so you can really get good at what you do. And so many of our young women have been taken down this primrose path of chasing a career and keeping the house up as well. You know, it's not like that crappy homemaker stuff went away because mom's now working. Nope, it all still needs to be done. Only it's not really getting done nearly as well as it could, is it? Cooking for family and friends, that becomes eating out at fancy restaurants. Raising your children has become a couple hours in the evening and weekends. Unless you're divorced, you may not even have most weekends. I mean, you got to think about how much time do you actually spend with your children, and how much time do they spend with other people? Giving 100% of your time to family is a full-time job that doesn't require you to get the kids up early in the morning and rush them around the house. Get dressed, feed them, get into the car so you can ship them off to someone else's care while you're struggling through traffic to sit in a cube somewhere. Or maybe you're rushing around waiting tables even more, and you're serving food to someone else that someone else cooked who's not your family. It's absolutely crazy how we've demeaned the most important job in the world and substituted it with boring cubicles and serving others instead of serving our families. I'm going on and on here. I'll just end it for now. Regain my peace, and I hope you'll try the simple cheese with roasted asparagus. Remember to stop by the website, sign up for our newsletter so you can get links to the latest recipes that I've published. As always, I'm here to help you taste the traditional touch. Thank you so much for listening, and until next time, may God fill your life with grace and peace.